Hello, Kentucky oboists. My name is Dr. Toni Marie Marchioni, and I am the new oboe professor at University of Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us here on YouTube. UK bands are offering a great service this year where you can take a lesson from the privacy of your own home with our wonderful faculty, and this video is aimed to help you prepare for the 2013-14 KMEA All-State auditions. So with that in mind, today we're going to be looking at the two beautiful Farrelling etudes that are this year's audition repertoire. The first one we're going to look at is the slow number 17 in B-flat major. Now, the judges want to hear you play this to see how musical and how expressive you can be, but while also maintaining a sense of rhythm and pulse in a slow tempo. So to begin digesting this piece, we're going to start by looking at the tempo and character marking. I like to think that the composers aren't just giving us an idea of what tempo they want us to play, but also in what style and with what type of emotional content. So, Farrelling says adagio cantabile. So adagio, we know it's going to be slow, and cantabile in a singing manner or very vocally. So we're looking at our metronome marking. He gives us 88 to the 88 to the eighth note, which means he wants us to be thinking in eighth notes or in 8 rather than in a slow 4. And for us to really find the good tempo for this piece, not only just by going to our metronome, but in any piece of music, we want to look at the smallest note values to see how can we play those smallest note values. So in this piece, the 32nd note, how can we play those within the character of the piece, and in this case, in a vocal or expressive and singing manner. So we know that this is going to be on the slow end and really smooth and legato and expressive. So that's number one. Number two, I would love to break down these ornaments with you, because sometimes it can get confusing as to where do these ornaments fit into the beat and how am I going to make them make sense. So what I like to tell my students, and anytime you see an ornament, is to take it away. So just play the rhythm without the ornament. So let's start by looking at measure 3. That's what it would be without the turn, the ornament. With the ornament, and that's how we figure out how to put it in. Likewise, we have measure 6, where we have the turn. If you're having trouble figuring out how to get that in, break it down without the turn. And then you can add it back in. So by doing that, we always preserve the underlying rhythm. We're not just adding in ornaments to be fancy. We want to hear the rhythm underneath that ornament. And then we also have what Farrelling marks as CAD. What is CAD? Well, CAD, with the abbreviation in measure 7, is abbreviation for cadenza. And cadenza is a written out passage that is virtuosic and shows off your musicality and your expression and your technique, but should seem kind of improvised or seem free rhythmically. So in this case, we really want to explore all the different expressions and tempo that we can do within this what's written out. So I actually like to think of this cadenza as a roller coaster. So starting on the high C with the fermata in bar 7, we have da dee da dee da dee da 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 da. So I like to think that we're going up the hill on the roller coaster, and then we get the momentum and we come back down. And so it's nice to feel a sense of organic and natural pacing where we have something gaining momentum as we go down the scale. And then likewise on the way up, we're holding the fermata on the low C and gradually climbing the ladder until we hit the climax on the high D, which then finishes the whole excerpt cadencing back in F major. So let's explore this in a little bit more detail now that we've talked about the main bullet points. Our first 2 bars, we want to be as legato and connected as possible while still feeling a sense of arch and blossoming into the beginning of the 2nd bar before we come away. Now it's really important to make sure that you're playing a 16th note on the 2nd half of the, what would that be, the 4th 8th note. Not an 8th note or not a 32nd. It should be very locked in metronomically. And as we do the downward slurs on see if you can make the air very pressurized and smooth, and it still have some intensity and soft texturedness to the tone, so that we have a beautiful heartfelt opening to the whole excerpt. So I'm going to go ahead and play this whole excerpt for you, and a couple things that I want you to look out for. When we have articulation markings, for example, in measure 3, there's a staccato on the F. The staccato is not meaning short. Remember that staccato means separate. And so especially in a case like this, where you have a very vocal, expressive, slow piece, that articulation should always be within the character of this movement. So we don't want a staccato dot. We don't want that. We instead want that as kind of a end of a phrase mark until we go on to the high D. And then you can go on after you finish that phrase. But it shouldn't sound like, because that wouldn't be as musical or as flowing or as elegant. Then on beat 4, we have these sextuplet 16th notes. And notice we have 2 of them are under the previous slur, and then the next 4 have this interesting slur dot articulation. That should be a really nice, gooey legato portamento articulation. So at the start of those 30 seconds, something like that. Another thing to watch out for when you're getting into your half notes in measure 5, the D and the F sharp trill, make sure, this is one of the telltale signs if you have the pulse really firmly in your head or not. Make sure that you are thinking 4 eighth notes in each of those half notes. And sometimes what we do is we're coming out of all these fast notes and then we get to a long note and we can't find our pulse. So for those 2 half notes, really remember that we're in the 8th note pulse. Another thing to be aware of is that trill. Think of, again, the trill should be within the character of this piece, so it's not going to be the same type of trill as if we were playing the fast movement of the Mozart concerto, which would have a nice, bright, buoyant, fast trill. Instead, this is going to maybe start out slow and then gain momentum gradually, but still within the character of this slow movement. Maybe something like that. And then we've already briefly discussed the cadenza. So now that I've walked you through this, here we go. Here is Fairling number 17, the first 8 measures, as asked for the all-state auditions. So the goal, again, with this Fairling etude is how musical, how expressive, how nuanced, and with how much intensity of line can you play this while still maintaining a really strong sense of pulse and rhythm in this low tempo. And I like to always remember that Fairling didn't know, well, maybe he knew these were etudes, but he was thinking of them as music, and we need to think of them as music too. So nothing, these aren't just like eating broccoli. It is good for our body, just like broccoli is, but these are also opportunities for us to be as musical and as expressive as possible. So that's number 17. The other excerpt that we have this year is number 24 in F sharp minor. Now, we have already said before that the goal of 17 was to show how musical and how legato and how beautifully we can play. And with 24, this is to show how much character can we play with, how great is our articulation, and how great are our fingers, because this one has a couple tricky things in it technically. So I like to start, like I did with the last one, talking about Adagio cantabile. I like to look at the character marking at this one also. So he labels it scherzando, or scherzo in Italian is the word for joke. And so scherzando means we should play this in a joking manner. So how might that affect how we play this? I like to think of it in our articulation and in our tempo and just in our whole manner. I mean, this should be playful and fun, really. And that's a little bit ironic when we think that it's in F sharp minor. We like to think sometimes of jokes and fun maybe related to more major keys, but that's all right. We'll do it with this one anyway. Great. So the other thing to notice about this one is that it's in 3/8 is our meter signature. And with all meters, but I think especially with meters in 3, think about other pieces you may know in 3/4, like a waltz. You often have one beat being stronger than the others, so not all beats are created equally. So I like to think of, especially in this one, where are our strong impulses going to be? We don't want to think of each beat in the bar. We want to think of the strong pulse in the bar and moving in longer phrases. So in this case, we're really going to have more impulse on beat 1. And really thinking of traveling from bar to bar and the buoyancy that we can get in our articulation. So that's another thing. Also, let's look at the variety of articulation that we have in this. We have lots of staccato markings, some accents. He even writes leggero under bar 5 to indicate he wants a light staccato in that bar, and then we have slurs. So he's also kind of testing our variety of articulation and how interesting and consistent can we make it. So I really love to infuse as much fun and character in this one, even in this faster tempo. There are lots of places for nuance in it. So let's go through it line by line. And I really like to think of that phrase going the whole way to the last bar of the line, to the E sharp. And why is the E sharp important in this? Well, E sharp in F sharp minor is the leading tone. It leads us back to the tonic of F sharp. So when we have interesting notes like that, we kind of want to give them an extra little bit of love. The next line, if you look at measures, and this is the second line, measure 5 and 6. We have a couple other special notes in there. We've got the high B reaching out from the after the G sharp in the first bar, and then we have another E sharp and then an E natural in the next bar. So we like to press on these chromatic notes and giving them, again, an extra little bit of attention. And then in that next measure, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or the second to last measure in the second line, in slow motion. That nice little bit of mixed articulation is a nice way to show your control of articulation within this fast tempo. Moving ahead, and you're looking at these cascading arpeggios that we have in line 3. Make sure that you're letting the low note notes come out as equally as the upper notes, and that you can really grab onto those high notes as you're starting each of them while still resolving each of them at the bottom of the arpeggio. If you're having trouble with those arpeggios, a nice way to practice them could be in rhythms. So that would be long, short. You could do short, long. You could do triplets. Or you could do, also you could stop on any of the notes that are giving you trouble. So say you were having trouble getting down to the B in the second arpeggio. Continually forcing yourself to stop on that note will help your brain orient itself right to that note, and you can find it easily. In the fourth line, we have this little ritardando that he marks in before the return of the main theme. And to pace this, I like to think that this is giving us a little bit of breathing room. It's kind of a perpetual motion thing, so it gives us a little bit of breathing room. And I like to think of the first beat of that measure right in tempo, the second beat a little bit slower, and then the third beat is where you have kind of a wind up back into the downbeat. So that might sound something like this. Maybe something like that. And then we have the second to last line, which holds the biggest fingering trap for all of us. Fourth bar of that line. Be sure that you give yourself a heads up in that measure to use left hand D sharp, because otherwise if you forget and you land on right hand D sharp, you're going to have to slide over to get back over the C sharp, and you'll most likely get a little bit stuck there. Another also coming out of the D sharp, you're probably going to be using forked F fingering for the E sharp. So just make sure you're really set up well for that measure, and that's going to have to be something that you drill, most likely. And then our beloved F sharp at the end. So if you need a good fingering for F sharp, if you have a third octave key, that can help. If you don't have a third octave key, don't worry, but you can use first octave key, half pull, 2, 1 on the right hand and the C key. That's been pretty reliable for me. If you have some multiphonicking going on or some cracking of that note, I would highly suggest that you practice what I call aspirated attacks. So, and this is actually a really great reed test too. If you want to find if your reed has the appropriate amount of cushion or good resistance in the reed, you can do this test also. But by aspirated attack, I mean that you don't tongue the note. You focus the air and you blow through the reed and until the note comes in. So, for example, and those are really good tests because it shows us exactly how much focus of the air do we need for it to come in. And when you're practicing this, try to make that amount of time as smaller and smaller as you go, so that eventually you can do it on cue. Once you have the air focused to that extent, tonguing it shouldn't be a problem at all. It should be pretty reliable for you, and because usually when those very high notes don't come out, it's something to do with the airspeed not being quite fast enough or quite focused enough at the back of the throat. So that aspirated attack should help you really hone in right there on that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you, number 24 in F sharp minor, Farrelling Etude. again, to recap number 24, the judges are going to be looking for your fluency of technique, how easy does this sound when you play it, but also, does it have some sort of vivacious character? This is a scherzo, remember, it's a joke, it's fun, it's playful. So trying to keep this as sunny and bright, even though it's in the F sharp minor key. And to help you do that, think about the quality of your articulation, and also just how can you flow from bar to bar without getting stuck in each beat of the measure. So thinking of the impulse on beat 1, moving you forward every time. So thank you very much for joining us on this lesson. Please check out the UK Oboe Studio on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/UK Oboes. And remember, my door is always open, so if you'd like to come for a lesson, just email me at the address on your screen, and it would be great to meet you. Thanks again, and best of luck.